State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the 22nd legislative day of the Alabama Legislature's 2025 regular session, leaving us just 8 more days remaining. The House and Senate will not convene tomorrow, allowing Wednesday to just be a committee day. Committee work is so critical at this point in the session as lawmakers are eager to get their bills through the process. On to legislative business. A bill to provide Alabama's teachers with workers' compensation coverage is now headed to the governor's desk. The Senate today concurred with the House version of Senate Bill 1, which creates a long-awaited workers' comp program for education employees across the state. The bill was sponsored by State Senator Sam Govan of Huntsville, who called it an important step forward for Alabama educators.
I just want to thank everyone for their help on this bill. This is an important bill. I don't know how many people, when I've talked about this, and they're like, why do you have this bill? And I'm like, our teachers and our education employees don't have workers' compensation insurance coverage. And everybody's just incredulous. They can't believe that they don't have this coverage. And so I appreciate everybody in the House and the Senate that worked with me on this. I look forward to hopefully seeing the governor sign this very soon. And I just want to thank everybody for this. Is an important step forward for our teachers.
In the House today, a major step forward for legislation aimed at curbing teen vaping. House Bill 8 from State Representative Barbara Drummond would impose tighter regulations on vaping products in Alabama. It would restrict vaping products from being sold in vending machines and give the Alabama Beverage Control Board the authority to regulate the sale of vape products. Drummond has brought this bill for 3 years now and is hoping that the third time is the charm.
But we failed to give any revenue to ABC and Aaliyah to enforce when they go. I admit it now. I thought they could go in when they're doing cigarette enforcement and look for stamps, but vape products are a lot more complicated. So this bill is going to create about $2.5 million for enforcement.
Okay, that's my second question. So how is that money going to be raised?
I can't hear you.
How is that money, the $2.5 million?
$2.5 million is going to be spent by, and the distribution is in the bill, but most of it will go to ABC and Aaliyah for enforcement.
So my question is, how is that money raised?
I actually worked with the convenience stores and the wholesalers. So this money will come derived from annual fees that they will pay. One is one-time fee and other fees, but they're going to actually pay those dollars, and that's how much it will create, and it's going to go to enforcement. And then the fees that are in the bill for the punitive side that Representative Colvin was talking about, those will go for us to create a curriculum to educate our children on how bad these products are and their parents.
So my understanding that the industry is going to pay for the infrastructure and the enforcement of their own industry.
Definitely.
That bill passed 89-9 and now goes to the Senate. Things got a little chippy today between the House and the Senate. It started upstairs in the Senate when Senator Andrew Jones warned that he would filibuster at length until all House bills on their calendar were set aside. He was frustrated that too few Senate bills were being taken up by the House, though he didn't offer specific details. The move underscores what seems to be a yearly dispute between the two chambers over whose bills get passed first. And it tends to happen around this time of the session, when the time is starting to run short for bills to get across the finish line. In the end, all House bills were carried over in the Senate. Here's what Jones had to say about the standoff.
Look, we've got processes and common courtesies between the two chambers that are kind of tradition, the way that we operate. And so when those processes are subverted and we go outside of the norm, then that's time to call into question what's going on and kind of to speak up. And so today I held up House bills, local bills, and HBs that were on the calendar so that leadership can get together and iron this out.
Do you think you can iron it out?
I think so. Of course, you know, I'm hopeful so because we have a lot of good bills that are out there. Of course, I'm prepared to stand at the mic again come Thursday when we're back in the chamber, or until it's resolved. But things have a way of working out, and I'm hopeful that our leadership can get together and get this straightened out.
Of course, the Senate's move to block House bills didn't go unnoticed in the lower chamber. The House responded in kind, setting aside the 2 Senate bills that it had on the agenda today. House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter responded by pointing out some statistics. According to his count, just 37 House bills have received final passage and been sent to the governor, while 49 Senate bills have been sent across the street. Here's what the Speaker had to say.
Let me give you the numbers. Y'all make a decision, okay? There's been 891 bills filed. The House out of this chamber has passed 277 bills. The Senate's only passed 119. Out of those bills, the House has sent House bills 37 to the governor's desk. The Senate bills have sent 49. So as you can see on percentage, we've done a lot more work as far as passage of bills and gotten fewer to the governor's desk. So the Senate actually has us outnumbered 37 to 49 to those that's been sent to the governor's office. And again, we've passed 277 to their 119. So I'll let y'all make that decision.
Well, another Senate bill got signed into law today, though I think both chambers would agree that this one was a team effort. Governor Kay Ivey has signed into law Senate Bill 252 from Senator Billy Beasley and sponsored in the House by Representative Philip Rigsby. The new law requires the pharmacy benefit managers to pay pharmacies more for the drugs they sell, including a $10.64 dispensing fee, the same as Medicaid reimbursement. Pharmacists across the state say unfair reimbursement practices from PBMs are putting hometown pharmacies out of business, and that this regulation is needed to stay afloat. Many in the business community had opposed the bill, saying it would raise health care costs for businesses and their employees. But several amendments were added along the way to address some of those concerns. Turning to Washington for a moment, as a key report related to Space Command was released today. You may remember that back in 2021, under President Donald Trump, the U.S. Air Force named Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville as the preferred location for the U.S. Space Command, which had been temporarily based in Colorado Springs as the Pentagon searched for a permanent home. 2 years later, President Joe Biden reversed that decision, saying the headquarters would remain in Colorado. That sparked outrage from Alabama's members of Congress, who said the decision reeked of politics, and they demanded an investigation. That investigation, conducted by a Department of Defense Inspector General, was reported out today. The report was heavily redacted, as these things with classified information tend to be, but we did learn some key details. The report confirmed that Huntsville's Redstone Arsenal was the Air Force's preferred location for Space Command, based on its own scoring. Investigators could not determine why that decision was not formally announced back in 2021. It's important to note that neither former Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall or former Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin were interviewed by the Inspector General. The White House counsel's office required that lawyers be present for those interviews or any involving White House staff, citing executive privilege. The IG chose not to comply with those demands, as it could have restricted its access to confidential information. And most of the members of Alabama's congressional delegation had reactions about that report today, including, of course, Congressman Mike Rogers, who chairs the House Armed Services Committee. He actually asked for the investigation to begin with, and he said the report shows how politics motivated the Biden White House's decision. Rogers said, quote, "The Inspector General's report confirms that the Trump administration was correct in selecting Huntsville as the site for SpaceCom headquarters, and reveals an astounding lack of transparency and accountability by the Biden administration. After years of promises about due diligence and careful consideration, political employees at the White House cut out the Air Force and senior defense leaders to select Colorado over Alabama as the site for SpaceCom headquarters," end quote. Delegation members are confident that Space Command will eventually land in Huntsville, and a decision is expected once the Senate confirms the new Air Force Secretary. Back here to the State House, the legislative panel overseeing the use of American Rescue Plan Act funding met today and heard an update on how the state is spending its dollars dedicated to expanding broadband internet into rural areas. There was some talk of private grants possibly being utilized, but committee members were told those monies can't intermingle with federal dollars per the Treasury's rules. Still, progress is being made to put ARPA funding to use.
Well, I'm still concerned about some of the wastewater systems. And, you know, I'm one who know that these dollars came in from the federal government with no match attached to it to the state of Alabama. And it was designed to go out into your rural, poor areas or areas that has not been served. And when we got the dollars, we were able to try to put a match on some of these communities. And I've been fighting to make sure that those rural communities that could not afford a match didn't have to come up with a match. And for some of it, you know, I'm one person, can't be all over the place. Some of it has slipped through the cracks. And that was some of the questions I had today, because I know the cities that I've asked about today have been required to do a match when they probably should not have been required to do a match. But, you know, here, they're still going to get services. They're going to get clean wastewater, and they're going to get a proper sewer in their community, that something they didn't have before.
Alabama's the winner. I think we are going to be able to use these funds. I think most all of us getting in the ground. There's not any particular waste or no one's hired additional people. It's all been done with the resources that we got, not taking any money out of the ARPAs, all going into the ground. I think all of that is excellent. I think it's one example of how Alabama has done quite well.
The Alabama Senate today welcomed a special guest, Director General Elliot Wang, Taiwan's top diplomat in the southeastern United States. Wang leads the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Atlanta. He spoke to lawmakers about the growing relationship between Taiwan and Alabama, highlighting both economic and military ties. Wang pointed to Taiwan's interest in high-tech investment in Alabama and the state's role in producing defense equipment purchased by Taiwan. His remarks come amid rising global concern about China's intentions to reclaim the island as its territory.
Taiwanese semiconductor delegation is paying visit here in May. We really like to see some major Taiwanese high-tech investment settled in Alabama as soon as possible. Last month, a delegation of high-ranking officials from Taiwan's Department of Defense proudly attended the first F-16 Block 70 fighter jets rollout ceremony in Greenville, South Carolina. A number of them studied at the Air War College in Montgomery before. And you can also see quite a few Taiwanese military officials in Huntsville and other locations in your states. Moreover, the advanced tanks and the Stinger missiles Taiwan purchased from the United States are also manufactured in Alabama.
We'll be right back with tonight's guest.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
The 375,000 acres that make up the 3 ranger districts of Talladega National Forest were purchased by the federal government in 1936 as part of an effort to restore clear-cut timberlands and farmlands no longer capable of producing crops. The beautiful reserve includes the 102-mile Pinhoti National Trail System and Alabama's highest and second highest points, Mount Cheaha and Duggar Mountain.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Jeff Sorrells from Hartford. Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Enjoyed coming.
Well, it just occurred to me as we were talking just a minute ago that you had not been on Capital Journal before. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to share a little bit with our audience about your district there in South Alabama.
Well, I represent District 87, which is all of Geneva County, and then a portion of Houston County up into Dothan. So most of my county is rural area. We have a wonderful place down there, a lot of farming industry, a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, and those kinds of things.
And tomatoes.
And tomatoes. We have Slocum, the capital of tomatoes, and the mayor of Slocum is a very good friend of mine, and I know he's going to appreciate the plug. But
well, look, we appreciate when y'all's delegation comes up with all the tomatoes. I mean, I just remember before your time, it was Harry Ann Smith, right, that would bring up the tomatoes. Whenever that season is, I don't know exactly when it is. Man, it was just nothing quite like that. Well, speaking of rural Alabama, this is kind of what we're getting to, because you had legislation on the floor today dealing with, it kind of stems from chronic wasting disease in deer and regulations around that. Can you just kind of back us up and tell us what led to this bill, what issues led up to this bill being necessary?
Well, it started about 5 years ago for me in kind of digging into the chronic wasting disease and then the conservation's rules that they had established. And, I've done a lot of research on these deer breeders. And there's two different facilities. There's a breeding facility and then there's a high fence hunting facility. The breeding facility are small 1 to 2 acre areas that they actually keep their breeding stock in. The high fence areas can range anywhere from 3 to 5 to 1,000 acres that are high fence that these animals are turned loose in for hunting purposes. So they're actually given the opportunity to escape or do whatever. It's not a small facility that you can just go shoot an animal. So I got involved with this, and recently in the last probably 2 years, conservation has done a tremendous amount of testing on wild deer populations. And they have found a couple of positives up in the northwest quadrant of Alabama. And when they found those, they actually drew a 25-mile radius around that positive test. And at that point in time, their rules specified that they could enter these breeding facilities and actually take out 10% of their animals just to test. I've seen and I've read information and done a lot of research on deer breeders. When a deer breeder has an animal that's 12 months old or older die in its facility, it is automatically tested.
Okay, for CWD.
For CWD, because that's the primary disease that will hit these animals. So they have that done, and in the 23 years that they've been testing deer in these deer breeding facilities, they have had 0 positives in these facilities. So it kind of troubled me when I saw that conservation was trying to come in and go into these facilities to take out animals for the sole purpose of testing.
Okay, so what does your legislation do to address that?
My legislation actually stops the ability to go into a deer breeding facility and take out these animals if you find it in the wild. Now, should it be detected inside the facility, there will be a whole new set of rules that will be established to do something with that. But it would just stop them from going in to take out 10% of these people's breeding stock to be able to kill to test for CWD.
Okay, I see. So if the wild deer is tested and the breeding facility is in that 1,000, it may not have originated at the breeding facility. It probably didn't, in fact. But if it's in that radius, they could go in, and your bill says no, you cannot go into the privately owned facility.
Right.
Okay.
And that's another aspect of the bill is privately owned, because up until we pass this bill, which is still got another hurdle, but up until then, conservation felt like they owned these animals that these people had bought, paid for, and care for, and actually breed that are inside these breeding facilities. They said that the state owned those animals. And this bill basically privatized ownership of those animals to the deer breeders. So they actually own the animals, and that was something else that we wanted to see take place and happen, so that they had the ownership. I mean, these are not $200 animals. These are expensive animals that they're breeding, And the way that they do it is they're trying to breed out CWD because they've located genetic markers that enable them to breed deer that are not susceptible to CWD. It's the very same thing that they had when sheep had scabies. They actually came in and bred those sheep to be resistant to the scabies disease. And now you very, very rarely hear about scabies anymore. But these guys, that's what they're doing now. They're actually going in and genetically breeding these animals to be resistant to CWD.
Well, it would be nice if years from now you could breed it out of the deer population. We wouldn't have to worry about chronic wasting disease. Now, the department did push back on you on this legislation. I saw this email that went out to lawmakers, really critical of the legislation, said it might jeopardize their ability to regulate hunting and fishing, said it limits their ability to test, which is so crucial to ridding our state or keeping CDW from expanding. How do you respond to some of their criticisms of your legislation?
Well, the bill doesn't deal with hunting or fishing, period. There's no mention of hunting or fishing in the bill. So the bill has nothing to do with that. And as far as the testing or going in and inspecting these facilities, they still have the authority to go in and test. They still receive the license fees off of these facilities. So it's not hindering them in any way except from stopping them from going in and killing these deer. So now I did put an amendment on the bill today, which was a little troublesome to some people, and I understood that dealt with the movement of these deer.
Okay. Was this a compromise of sorts, or what?
Well, it was a compromise between me and some constituents. It wasn't a compromise between me and conservation.
Okay. What did it do again?
Well, when you have these animals that you're breeding and they get up to the age that you want to sell them to a high fence hunter or to another breeder that wants to breed animals, and you are inside a chronic wasting disease management area, which is that 25-mile radius we talked about, then conservation says you can't move that animal outside of that zone. And what the legislation actually did was say you can, but these are the things that have to be done before you can.
So they have to be, specifically not have the disease and things like that.
Right. The animal has to test negative for chronic wasting disease. Another thing was that if you double fence, then you can move those animals. If you have a double fence in your facility, then you can move those animals back and forth, because the animals that are bred in these facilities are never released in the wild. They're always inside enclosures. So with the double fencing, it helped to keep from the CWD coming from the outside into the inside.
I see. Well, like I said, it passed the House today, goes upstairs to the Senate. We're getting, in the crunch time in the legislative session here. What are the prospects? What are you hearing from your colleagues in the Senate about its prospects up there?
Well, I think it's very good. We've spent a lot of time on this bill, have put a lot of effort into this bill, and I think, one thing I've tried to do, Todd, when I've been in Montgomery is do what's right. And I feel like if I do what's right, things will take care of themselves. And I think this is right. And so I feel very much like this thing will end up finally getting through the final hurdle.
We will certainly be following it. I did have one question. I think it just came up on the floor, and I thought, that's a good point that we ought to remind viewers of, is if a deer does have chronic wasting disease, and maybe you don't know it, maybe you shoot a deer, you don't know it, and you consume that deer, is there any harm that meat would do if it does have that CWD?
No, it's been determined that the meat is fine. The actual disease probably takes about 5 years to run its course, because it starts in the deer's brain and works its way back.
Okay.
So everything as far as the meat is concerned, there's never been a problem with that. And it's been thoroughly vetted and tested to make sure.
So it's a problem to deer populations. It's not a problem to humans or anything.
No.
Yeah. Well, no. I'm not a hunter, if you can tell, so I'm asking all these questions. But my neighbor is Jackie Bushman, so I feel like I learn a lot from that. Well, look, we'll watch the bill going forward, and I really appreciate your time coming on Capitol Journal.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Enjoyed being here.
We'll be right back.
Perfect.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Senator, statesman, and U.S. Vice President William Rufus King of Dallas County served in the U.S. Senate for more than 30 years. In 1852, King was elected vice president on the ticket with Franklin Pierce. While recovering from illness in Cuba, King became the only member of the U.S. executive branch to ever have been sworn into office on foreign soil. He passed away less than a month after being inaugurated.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night with more coverage of the Alabama legislature at the same time here on APT. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.